There's been multiple times when I've thought, is this really worth it? And I went to a trade show and like 5 people stopped me at the trade show and they said, hey, I just want you to know, I love your podcast.
No
I'm like, dang, this is awesome. All right, so I got to keep it going.
Welcome back to the Pod Junction podcast, the show where business leaders share how they use podcasting to grow, connect, and build their brands. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Brett Curry. Brett is the CEO and co-founder of OMG Commerce, a powerhouse agency that helps e-commerce brands scale through strategic Google, YouTube, and Amazon advertising. He is also the host of the E-commerce Evolution podcast, where he gets into the latest trends, strategies, and stories from top e-commerce entrepreneurs and marketers. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here on a podcast about podcasts. I don't think anything could be more meta than that, but I love this topic, and so I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Brett, you know what? You've built a powerhouse agency helping brands grow through strategic marketing, which is totally awesome. But here's what I'm curious about. Running an agency is already a full-time job. So why add a podcast to the mix?
Yeah, so maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment. You know, I have a lot of kids at home as well. So like if things are not feeling chaotic enough, I just need to throw something else into the mix. But in all seriousness, one, I do enjoy doing it. So that's the first thing I want to get on the table. But I remember hearing years ago that from a marketing pro that I really admire, he said that, hey, every company should also view themselves as a media company. So you are in the business of providing a service or a widget or whatever, yes, of course, but you're also a media company, meaning, you know, we need to constantly attract the attention, keep the attention of our core audience. And so how can you publish great content and be a media company as well? And so I love talking. I don't mind being on camera. I love speaking on stages, and I love podcasts. I love to consume podcasts. I'm generally listening to podcasts when I drive rather than music, although I do like to rock out every now and then, unplug a little bit. So a podcast was a natural fit for me. And so use it to grow the business, to grow the agency, but also lots of other benefits to hosting a podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that you say that you enjoy it. It's a natural fit because I think that's where you get the longevity in it.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. So what came first then? Or I guess maybe how soon after you started the business did podcasting come in? I'm not sure of your story, actually.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and speaking of longevity, so E-commerce Evolution, we're over 300 episodes now. Started in 2017, so it's been just, you know, pretty steady. I've gone through periods where I'm just a couple episodes a month, and sometimes where I'm 3 episodes a month, sometimes where I'm every week and stuff. Yeah. So, but consistently been publishing since 2017. Actually started my first podcast with a partner agency. I believe it was like 2014 or something. I was with a development agency that we partnered with them. They built Magento websites. We did marketing, and so we joined forces, and then we did a podcast together. So that was really early days. We actually did that on Google Hangouts way back in the day, and then published them. And so but the agency came first. I mean, I love marketing and love marketing services. I always tell people, I'm not a product guy. Like I'm not in the shower dreaming of the next invention or how can I come up with something that's going to land me on Shark Tank to pitch to the sharks. But if someone else does that and they've got a great product or a great supplement or something like that, I am filled with all kinds of ideas on how to grow that and scale that. And so marketing services, agency life was right for me. So that came first. Podcast came second.
Google Hangouts. I remember that.
Yeah, that was back in the day for sure. So,
well, that's very cool that you did it then as well, like over that. So, how has your podcast then helped you with your agency?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, the easy, obvious answer is we do attract clients through the podcast. So, I constantly try to deliver value. What's new? What's next in e-commerce? How can you grow your e-commerce business? through new traffic sources, conversion rate optimization, retention marketing, things like that. I interview great brands. So attracting clients, that's the easy, obvious, no-brainer type of thing, right? And actually, we just a couple months ago closed a really big client. And they were like, hey, been listening to the podcast forever. Finally made sense to reach out, but feel like I know you, now that I've been listening to the podcast for so long. And so that's the easy, obvious one. But then there's all kinds of related benefits. So, I use it as a tool to build relationships as well. So, I have other influencers and other leaders in the space on the podcast. And one, it's a great way to get to know people. And then two, some of those, turn into referral partners or joint venture partners, or we do things together after the podcast. And so it's more than just client attraction. It's, hey, as I interview this thought leader, may we become friends, may we just do stuff ongoing. And in fact, Matt Edmondson, who I know you work with, we got introed through a mutual friend, but then we did a couple podcasts together. And we're like, hey, this guy's pretty cool. Hey, that guy's pretty cool. And so we end up now chatting fairly frequently. And so build friendships, build partnerships. And, we're still driven a lot by referrals as an agency. So these partner relationships that I build up through the podcast, they lead to referrals. Sometimes that's kind of unpredictable, or it is unpredictable. It just happens when it happens. But it's still a benefit, and it's still another thing to kind of layer onto the agency. And so there's many other benefits that I can kind of unpack. I've got several that I think are worth mentioning, but I'll pause there to see if you have any thing to add or ask.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There are so many benefits, and I'd love for you to get into them some more. But just a quick question before you do that. You said that for you, the easiest and the most obvious thing was attracting clients. And then you said that, often you'll have people who've been listening to the podcast that be like, yeah, I've been listening to you for ages, sign me up kind of thing. Actually, you didn't say that many words, but, just reading between the lines. So how is it you do that?
Yeah. So I think it's a couple of things. One, I try to deliver value on the podcast. And also what I try to do is always share my experiences, right? So we're talking about conversion rate optimization. We're talking about opening new traffic sources for an e-com brand. I'm going to share stories. I'm going to share examples of what I've done, what we've done as an agency, who we've helped, things like that. And so as you start telling these stories and we're sharing it from an example of, hey, here's what we did for Arctic coolers, or here's what we did for native deodorant. The listener gets benefit from that. They can then take that and run with it. But they also are thinking, wait a minute, if they did that for native and they grew, from 100 million to $1 billion over 6 years or whatever, maybe I should talk to them about doing that for my business. And so it's definitely more of a soft sell, more of a subtle thing.
Yeah.
Most people that listen never reach out, and that's fine. It's more of a soft sell. But as I'm being helpful, I'm always trying to weave in stories, weave in case studies, weave in real world examples of what we've done, because it serves a dual purpose. It's helpful, but it also points people to the agency.
Yeah. And then do you use those episodes that you create with all these case studies and stories, and like you dice them up and put them out in newsletters or blogs and social media? Do you do all that as well?
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the other benefits of doing a podcast is, one, if you are consistent with it, if it's something you enjoy. I prefer to podcast over writing, and I do both. I do write as well, but I prefer podcasting. It keeps me in a constant rhythm of content creation. And so one thing that's really important for people to note is, if you run a podcast, the people that listen to your podcast or watch your podcast on YouTube, that's only part of the reach, right? I can think of a few people whose content I consume. Andrew Huberman is one. I love him. He's in the health space. Joe Rogan pops up in my feed all the time on Instagram or other places. I don't really listen to either of their shows, but I do consume little 1 minute or 2 minute sound bites as they pop up in my feed. And so the same can happen for you. So maybe you've got people that are in your market, that are your ideal client or ideal customer. They're not consuming the whole podcast, but now that you're creating it, you can slice and dice that 100 different ways, or call it 10 pieces of content per episode. Maybe one of those is going to resonate with your audience, and now there's another connection point. And so I've kind of focused on LinkedIn as the additional channel for me in addition to podcasting. But the podcast clips, the podcast lessons, the things that we discuss in the podcast, I then turn that into multiple LinkedIn posts, and then you can, double, triple, quadruple, 10x, your reach with that content when you share it across those additional channels.
Wow. I really like that, especially what you said about the social media reels and things, because they're just time consuming to create.
Yeah, they are.
But I like what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, you're already sitting down to have this conversation. There's going to be, if you're recording for 30 minutes, you're going to have 5 or 6 probably little clips that you can use. You record for an hour, maybe you have 10. But some of those are going to be gold, and some of those are really going to resonate with somebody. And what's interesting to me is, I don't know if you've been this way with your own podcast, but there's been multiple times when I've thought, is this really worth it? Like, should I keep going? Because it is a bit of a grind. I enjoy it. I like this part. I love talking to you, delivering value. I love that. But there's other, then you got to review all the clips, and someone's got to post them, and you got to edit it, and you got to schedule things. And if I'm, fighting fires in the agency and then I got to set aside a couple hours to record, there's always a reason not to do it. And so the times though that I've been almost ready to quit, I remember one time I was really, really, really ready to quit, and I went to a trade show, and like 5 people stopped me at the trade show and they said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I love your podcast." And I'm like, dang, this is awesome. All right, so I got to keep it going. So that can be a reminder. Like sometimes you feel like, man, who am I even speaking to? But then also you get interactions on socials, and you're like, okay, all right, these little clips, even if it's a 1-minute bite or a 2-minute bite from this podcast, it's delivering value to people. I should keep this going. That type of thing.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Brett, do you have any stories about someone who's come to you after having listened to a podcast or many podcasts? Yeah,
so we have a female clothing line, but I didn't get permission to share the brand, so I won't. But great client, just absolutely stunning client. They're one of the biggest in their space, and now they started with one service with us. Now I think they've got 3 or 4, maybe about to add the 5th. And came from the podcast. The guy's like, "Hey, been listening forever. Love your style. Love what you do." And so let's chat. So that happened. I was at a trade show in Fort Lauderdale recently. Somebody stopped me and said, "Hey man, I want to tell you, love the pod." And so it's like, I didn't know this guy. It was really cool. And so I think, all of those things, if we think about whatever we're trying to do, we're trying to we've got a service-based business, or we're selling widgets or whatever, anything we can do to build trust goes a long, long way. I once heard someone say that marketing is really a transfer of trust. I have complete trust in my service and my product, whatever the case is. I need to transfer that trust to my ideal customer. That's really marketing. And podcasts are a great way to facilitate that and to share trust. And one other thing I'll kind of mention, I heard this from Alex Hormozy first. He said, "Hey, you're sharing content, and let's say you get 300, you get a reach of 300 people, right? You may look at that and you're like, well, that's really frustrating. I'm not getting millions of views. I'm not getting thousands of likes. I'm not getting 100 people sharing my content." But he's like, think about that in terms of a room. If you're on stage speaking to 300 people, that's a big deal, right? So even small reach podcasts, especially if you're in the service-based business, and I think we're in the top 1 or 2% of podcast listeners. I'm not exactly sure, but we got a top 2% notice not too long ago. But even if it's small, it's like, hey, for me to replicate this by like speaking at events or something, even a few hundred people is a significant audience if it's the right people. Yes. So I think that's important to note as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Brett, every podcast comes with its own learning curve too. And I know it's been a while, and I know you're great at what you do, but can you remember, if you think back, some of the biggest challenges you faced when you first started e-commerce evolution podcast?
Yeah. And so just a quick funny side note.
Okay.
The first podcast I did, I think this is still on YouTube, and it's probably pretty embarrassing if it is. But the company we partnered with was called Classy Llama. They still exist. I'm still friends with the CEO. He's an awesome guy. Shout out to Kurt Theobald. But it was called the Llama Commerce Show. And so we had a cool logo with a llama and a microphone. And I was really into like delivering value. My co-host Kurt was more into just having fun. And most of the time it worked. Like we had good synergy, good chemistry. There's a couple episodes that like totally, I was like, that was so awkward. But I think there was just a few times where we didn't think through enough, like what questions are we going to ask? How is this going to flow? I've always been pretty good on my feet and, done improv or so, like not again, comedy clubs, but improv, like in speech class and stuff like that. I always was pretty fast on my feet. So I think that most of the mistakes I made were just not preparing enough. But it's also fine. One, if your podcast isn't perfect, I think that's ideal, right? You have little blips in the middle that just show you're human, or you got a few ums or uhs. I think that's totally fine. If you say something completely off the rail or stumble, you can always edit that out, right? But I think showing your humanity is important. But I think most of the mistakes were me not really preparing enough in terms of questions I was going to ask, or thinking through, okay, this is the topic, this is the guest. What are the most pressing and important things that the audience wants to hear that I need to pull out of this conversation? So that's probably the biggest thing. Another thing that I think is really important is, sometimes you get someone on who's a guest who's used to public speaking, or they've been on the podcast and they're just a great interview. Sometimes you get people on a podcast who've never been on before, and they ramble and they meander and they tell stories that are not relevant. And so understanding, when do I cut someone off politely and redirect the conversation? Because if you think about this, you're almost like a radio host, right? Like call in radio show host. Man, if I'm listening to a radio show and a caller just drones on, I'm begging for the host to cut that thing short or to redirect it. As hosts, we've got to do that too. And then on occasion, this doesn't happen a whole lot, but I've had to look at a recording and say, that wasn't good enough, right? Like that. We just got to scrap that and either do it again or just, chalk it up to a learning experience and not publish that.
Yeah. On that, what do you do in that case? Do you go back to them? Like, if you're not going to use the episode, you go back to the guest and say, thank you.
Yeah. So it's only happened a few times. And so generally then what I try to do is say, hey, here's what I'm thinking with this episode. And this was on me, but I think there's some really good clips in this show that I can share on socials, but I don't think it's a full episode. And so I've kind of presented it that way to a couple of guests. And, it's not necessarily welcome news, but I think people understand. I think the thing you've got to keep in mind, though, is your responsibility isn't first and foremost to your guest. Your responsibility is first and foremost to your audience. Guests you want to take care of as well. It's their time. You want to respect that. You want to honor that. But on occasion, it's not really going to be good enough or not going to work if you're doing an interview podcast type of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I've approached it. And then there's been a couple times. One was even like a guy that I'm good friends with. I was like, hey, I don't know that that's really a full episode. Here's what I'm going to do. I want to chop this up into a couple clips. I'll share them with you. I'll share them on the socials. I think we'll still get benefit out of it. You'll still get benefit out of it, that type of thing. And so that's worked pretty well. Yeah.
Wow. And they accept that, I guess, if you're still using it in some form.
Still using it in some form or fashion. I'm trying to think. There's maybe been a couple times when I haven't used an episode at all, but that's been rare. And so I think really what I've learned, though, is just be selective about who I have on the podcast, right? Used to I'd have people recommend, or hey, this person says that person should be on the podcast. Okay. And then I realized, that was a bad idea. So now I'm very selective about who's on the pod, because I found there are really two things that drive individual episode engagement. The topic, number one, obviously it's important, right? So in my world, in the e-commerce world, like anything about tariffs or shipping or cost cutting, like that's crazy popular right now. 6 months ago, it wouldn't have been as popular. So anything like that is popular. So topic is important. And then number two, it's guest. So who is the guest? If it's a big name guest, like I got to interview Dean Brennan from Heart and Soil. They're kind of a rising star e-commerce brand. Interviewed Jimmy Sandstone from the Normal brand, amazing apparel brand in the D2C space. Sean Frank from The Ridge. He's now a host of the Operators podcast. So you get a big guest on, and people are like, okay, I want to hear this one. So topic and guest really important. So be selective about that. I would rather someone do fewer episodes with great guests and timely topics than just cranking out episodes just because.
For the sake of it. Yeah. No, that's good. You said early on in this question about preparedness and making sure the flow worked.
Yeah.
And you also said you were co-host with Kurt. Was that part of the lack of preparedness when you've got a co-host?
Yes. Well, partially. So I think with a co-host, there's always just a little more coordination, because then it's like, okay, I need to focus. I need to think about the topic, think about questions. I need to share those questions with the co-host. We maybe need to go back and forth and collaborate a little bit. We were both super busy. He was running the company. I was running my company plus the marketing department there. So we just mostly winged it. And most of the time, like because of our personalities, it worked and it was fun, but we would have benefited from a little more prep. And so another thing I like to think about as I'm forming questions or thinking about the flow of a podcast is say, what's one burning question or burning topic that I can share right out of the gate, right? So someone's listening and immediately we're into it and delivering value. But then there's always something that I'm trying to tease early on, like, hey, we're going to get to this. We're going to talk about this point. We're going to break down this famous ad that you had as a brand. We're going to talk about how you launched this product, which has been super cool. Or like, I interviewed the guy from Mizzen and Maine, and he was on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and that like exploded his business. So like, I don't know, 20x his business. I can't remember the exact number, but so I started talking about the brand, but I teased that, hey, we're going to get into the Tim Ferriss story. So you're kind of teasing that out, and then visiting it later. In TV, or movies and stuff, they call it opening and closing loops, right? So I'm gonna deliver value, but then I'm gonna open a loop that I'm gonna close later to kind of keep people sticking around. And so some of those things are really important to try to do.
Yeah. Brett, thank you so much. There's so much insight that you've shared with us and tips and all. Thank you. Where do you see your podcast going next?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's something we talk about internally from time to time. We want to lean into YouTube a little bit more. As an agency, we're very focused on YouTube ads, and that's something that we're really good at for D2C brands. We're thinking, hey, let's lean into YouTube a little bit more on the content side. We're sharing shorts and sharing the episodes, and that's going fine. But I think there's more we can do there. What's kind of next, what we're kind of sketching out and trying to design now is more mini series on the podcast. So where we take 4 episodes and say, hey, this is going to be all about CRO, 4 episodes, right? Then you can promote that as an event on socials, and you have a few key guests. They promote it as well, where it's like, hey, tune into these 4 episodes about conversion rate optimization, or tune into these 4 episodes about how to, fix your P&L or whatever. And so that's what we're working on. I think that's something that's coming next. And then always working on reaching out to big brands, big successful D2C brands that have a great story, that want to be on the pod. And so that, like I said, the guest really drives listenership and really just makes for great content. And so also focusing on continuing to attract great brands.
Awesome. I'm interested to see what it would look like on, as you said, you're leaning more into YouTube. I'm keen to see what that will look like. Is that the near future, Brett, or is that longer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we can do more of this year. And we're going to continue sharing our shorts on the podcast, and those range from 400 or 500 views each. So sometimes one will get 6,000 or 7,000 views, for a single short. So we'll continue to do that. But I also think, in talking to a couple other big YouTubers, getting like 10-minute clips, 5-minute clips that are focused on a specific topic, those can do really well on YouTube as well. So it's something we're exploring this year. So probably, later in the year, but ideally a 2025 or a 2026 initiative. The series podcast want to execute on this year for sure. So
cool. Very cool. Brett, I love that. It's clear that podcasting has become a key part of how you share insights and connect with your audience.
Yeah. I don't know what I would do if I didn't podcast now, right? It kind of feels just part of what I do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Brett, this has been such fun digging into how you use podcasting to grow your business. But before we go, where can people connect with you, learn more about OMG Commerce, and of course, tune into E-Commerce Evolution podcast?
Great. Yeah. So easiest way is omgcommerce.com. You can check services, review case studies, kind of see what we're up to and what we're doing. So omgcommerce.com. LinkedIn for me. So I'm Brett Curry on LinkedIn. And then E-Commerce Evolution podcast, anywhere you like to listen to podcasts, whether that's YouTube or Spotify or good old-fashioned podcast app on Apple or whatever the case may be. But post 2 to 3 times a month on all of those platforms for E-Commerce Evolution. So check that out as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those tuning in, you'll find all the links and details in the description. And if you're listening and you are curious about using podcasting as a strategic tool for your own business growth, I hope this episode has inspired you to build credibility, trust, and connection with your audience. As always, thanks for listening, and bye from Brett and from me, and I'll see you next time.